Tonight, U.S. President Donald Trump is moving forward with sweeping tariffs. But what does that mean for Canada? Gas prices are down in Saskatchewan, but just how cheap is our gas compared to the rest of Canada?
I know what you're thinking.
And a new twist on a light lunch. A comedy club in Saskatoon offers some noon-hour comedy.
This is CBC Saskatchewan News.
It's Wednesday, April 2nd, and welcome to the CBC Saskatchewan News. Hello, everyone. I'm Dan Plaster. U.S. President Donald Trump has announced a 10% baseline tariff on all foreign goods. The new measure won't apply to goods compliant with the free trade agreement between the U.S., Canada, and Mexico. But the White House says existing tariffs on products from Canada and Mexico remain unchanged. He says America has been, quote, looted, pillaged, raped, and plundered by other nations for years. Chris Reyes has more.
President Donald Trump entered the Rose Garden at the White House with a Make America Great Again hat in hand and took the podium in front of a full audience that included his cabinet, Vice President J.D. Vance, auto workers. He spent the first 30 minutes of his speech railing against all of America's trading partners. He listed one grievance after another to justify what he called reciprocal tariffs.
This is one of the most important days, in my opinion, in American history. It's our declaration of economic independence. For years, hardworking American citizens were forced to sit on the sidelines as other nations got rich and powerful, much of it at our expense. But now it's our turn to prosper, and in so doing, use trillions and trillions of dollars to reduce our taxes and pay down our national debt, and it'll all happen very quickly.
President Trump explained that reciprocal tariffs will be calculated by combining the rate of tariffs and non-monetary barriers like currency manipulation, then divided in half, with some countries getting a break. He held up a chart to explain the breakdown, a chart that did not include Canada.
China, 67%. That's tariffs charged to the USA, including currency manipulation and trade barriers. So it's 67%, so we're going to be charging a discounted reciprocal tariff of 34%. I think, in other words, they charge us, we charge them less. So how can anybody be upset? They will be, because we never charge anybody anything, but now we're going to charge.
Trump did single out Canada during his speech, making false accusations against its dairy industry, which has protections that don't impact the U.S. Still, the president made a claim that he has repeated often.
Canada, by the way, imposes a 250 to 300% tariff on many of our dairy products.
After the event, the White House released a statement that goods from Canada that are compliant with the free trade agreement between Canada, the U.S., and Mexico, or CUSMA, will be exempt from reciprocal tariffs. But other goods that are not compliant will be hit with the 25% tariff announced earlier this year, while energy-related goods will be hit with 10%. Meanwhile, other countries will still be hit with a 10% baseline tariff against all imports into the U.S. and 25% on all foreign-made vehicles and auto parts coming into the country. Chris Reyes, CBC News, New York.
Prime Minister Mark Carney reacted to Canada being spared from Donald Trump's reciprocal tariffs, though the country still faces a 25% tariff on steel and aluminum set to kick off overnight. Here's what Carney.
The series of measures will directly affect millions of Canadians. We are going to fight these tariffs with countermeasures. We are going to protect our workers, and we are going to build the strongest economy.
All eyes at the provincial legislature were also on the potential tariffs. The premier is in Europe on a trade mission, but he released a statement after Trump's announcement. He says while he's still seeking confirmation, it appears no further tariffs were imposed on Canada, and that it appears Canada's approach of a coordinated, strong, and measured response has been successful. He says the provincial government will continue to focus on making the case for the benefits of free trade with the United States. Opposition leader Carla Beck was also welcomed the news on Thursday.
Even if the best case scenario today proves to be true, that Canada is not going to face those 10% tariffs. The reality is that the uncertainty that we've been experiencing in this country has already had impacts.
Beck says businesses in the province have already had to take measures in response to tariffs, and that she doubts Canada is finished with the threat of tariffs from President Trump quite yet. The Union for Saskatoon Transit Workers wants buses outfitted with naloxone kits as the city's drug poisoning crisis continues. But bus drivers say they are seeing more unresponsive passengers on their routes. Usually bus drivers call emergency services for medical assistance, but ATU Local 615 says putting naloxone on buses is a good backup plan. The city says there is no policy against putting overdose reversal supplies on buses, but it is up to each employee to decide whether to carry naloxone kits.
If an employee is comfortable with doing that, I think, they'd want to work with their manager on that again. Because again, do you stop a city bus? There's lots of things to consider. And so we really want to be a conversation with the manager, but it's not something we're requiring employees to do. And we also want to make sure that, any naloxone supplies are getting to the right people who need it.
The Saskatoon Fire Department says so far this year it has responded to nearly 840 calls for suspected overdoses. That's more than double the number from last year. Measles is spreading across Canada with large outbreaks in several provinces. In Saskatchewan, we've only had a few confirmed cases, but it's causing alarm and some confusion. Many adults don't know what their vaccination status is or what they should be doing. So our Colleen Silverthorne set out to get the answers.
Doctors say some adults might not be fully protected against the measles. They likely need a booster shot to get to full immunity. That's after there were 3 confirmed cases of the highly contagious virus in the province last month. The health authority wants everyone to check their immunization records, but for some people, it's not that simple. Measles is one of the most contagious diseases in the world. It causes fever, rash, and in severe cases, even death. Public vaccination programs had all but eliminated the disease in Canada, but now it's back. And while there are calls for children to be vaccinated, there's also an entire group of adults who likely aren't fully protected from catching measles. That's because people born between 1970 and 1996 only received 1 dose of the measles vaccination. Research has since shown 2 doses are needed for full protection. One family doctor says if you're in that group, you should get a booster shot, even if you think you had measles as a child.
We can't fully assume that whatever you might have had as a kid was measles for sure. So if you're in that age range of 70 to 96 birth year, really recommend getting that booster shot.
If you're born before 1970, you probably already had measles because it was so common back then. So you don't need a booster. The province doesn't have records for anyone born before 1978. For everyone else, you can check your childhood vaccination history through eHealth. Even if you can't find your records but might have already been vaccinated, a clinical microbiologist says getting another shot won't hurt.
We just went through that in our own family. With my wife, actually. We had 2 choices to try and see whether or not she could get an antibody test to see whether she was immune or just give her a booster dose. And the decision was taken, it was just simpler to give her a booster dose. So those 2 options exist.
And if you're a parent of young kids, you might want to check their vaccination records too. Last year, only 75% of 2-year-olds had both doses of their measles vaccinations. Our expert says to stop the virus from spreading, that number should be higher than 97%. Colleen Silverthorne, CBC News, Regina.
Many diabetics are applauding the province's decision to expand coverage of glucose monitors, but some say the move doesn't go far enough. Effective this week, young adults and seniors will now have their monitors fully covered. That means anyone up to the age of 25 as well as 65 and up. A Saskatoon man says coverage should be expanded to all adults in the province.
It's by far the most important thing that someone with diabetes can have. It's really the amount of data that you get is just uncomparable to pricking your fingers, right? So if I'm getting a reading every 5 minutes, that would be equivalent to me pricking my finger every 5 minutes to see what my blood sugar's at. Since I've started using one, I think about 5 or 6 years now, I haven't had any emergency room visits. I have had one incident that if I didn't have a CGM, I probably would have ended up in the hospital.
Without private insurance, a continuous glucose monitor typically costs around $300 a month. The province isn't ruling out expanding coverage to all adults, but says that would be considered in the normal budget cycle. A busy but dreary day on Victoria Avenue in Regina. Kind of feels like we're in a holding pattern with the weather right now. Not quite full out spring, but also not really that winter either. Are we finally going to see spring temperatures? Well, Ethan Williams will tell us more after the break. Stick around. Welcome back. Tuesday marked the beginning of the federal carbon tax pause nationwide. Gas prices were supposed to drop by 18 cents immediately, but some say that hasn't been the case everywhere. We spoke to a petroleum expert to find out what's going on.
According to our data, the average price on Sunday was $1.57 in Regina. Now we're down to an average of $1.44.1, so almost a 13-cent liter drop. The averages do continue to point to even lower prices. So this is kind of fairly typical, decrease of about 13 cents a liter. We saw gas prices increase in the days prior to the pause. Simply coincidental. Almost every year, gas prices go up every spring as they did last year. There's a lot of cynical folks who think this is somehow, the oil companies raise prices to offset the carbon tax, but a lot of this is seasonal. Gas prices have gone up across much of Canada and the United States over the last week. Things like refinery maintenance are happening now before the start of the summer. Refinery maintenance limits the refinery's ability to produce as much gasoline, kind of like it's very difficult for you to drive your car if it's being serviced at the same time. In addition, we're making the transition from winter gasoline to summer gasoline. That's basically why we saw the increase here over the last couple of days prior to the carbon tax pause, was because of the transition to summer gasoline, which is more expensive. And at the same time this is happening, more Canadians are getting out and about as temperatures do start to gradually warm up. There's more travelers on the road, and that increase for demand generally pushes prices up as well. The good news is that, looking at where prices stand today across Canada, and let me pull up Regina again here specifically, the average price in Regina now about 13 cents lower than where we were last year on this day. If we follow historical norms, it's likely or possible that prices could continue trending up for the next few weeks until we hit a peak price, and then eventually prices do recede into the summer. So that's what I would expect. The seasonality is going to continue to likely push prices up gently over the next, call it 4 weeks, and then prices will start to trend lower for really much of the rest of the year unless there's any issues. Without the carbon tax pause, gas prices would be another 17 cents a liter higher. So I know folks don't always think that it works the way they want it to, but there's many factors that can drive oil prices up or down, and other factors that can layer together.
Ethan Williams now in with a look at weather. And Ethan, I guess, like it has been the last few weeks, just a mixed bag all over the province.
Yeah, and I don't mean to make you folks in southern Saskatchewan jealous, Dan, but sun came out in Saskatoon on this Wednesday. Sadly, Regina, southern Saskatchewan, still seeing some cloud cover out there as well. Yeah, but you're right. A real mixed bag of weather is what we've been seeing, of course, throughout the province. We'll take a look at where that cloud cover is now across the province, as we saw on Wednesday. You see much of the north there under cloudy skies, but then you can see where that band of cloud cover clears through Saskatoon and central areas. There is a cold front right along kind of the boundary line between where the cloud is and where the clearing skies are. That was also triggering off some flurries and light snow into southwestern Saskatchewan a bit earlier Wednesday, but that has since dissipated. That cold front also having a bit of an effect on temperatures through portions of central Saskatchewan, barely getting above the freezing mark, but in the south, especially closer to the southern border, we did get a few degrees above freezing. But in northern Saskatchewan, those temperatures you see there were actually the daytime highs that were hit very, very early in the morning. We've been dropping temperature-wise in a lot of places since then as that snow has been moving through. That cold front also has been picking up winds and that has been adding a bit of a chill factor to our temperatures as we've gone through Wednesday. That snow in the north, though, has mostly begun to move out, and overnight for south and central, a lot of us going to continue to see those skies clear. That'll drop temperatures for a lot of us, so again, a little bit of an unseasonably cool night. But as we get into Thursday, a little bit of cloud cover builds back in, and the possibility again for some flurries and light snow into southwestern Saskatchewan and south central areas. Regina and the southeast, we may catch a bit of some flurries or light snow tomorrow night into Thursday night. This model a bit aggressive, I think, on how much of the snow we're actually going to be seeing. A little more substantial clearing into Friday morning as high pressure moves in, but then as that moves away, cloud starts to build back in for your Saturday morning, and maybe some flurries or light snow for the Parkland region before that moves into Manitoba, and we get some clearing into Saturday afternoon. For the north, expecting another 2 to 4 centimeters, especially if you're closer to that northern border. Churchill region, though, I think for most of you, by and large, the snow is over for you folks. Winds are going to stay a little bit breezy, though, as this instability continues over the next couple of days. And particularly through the north, we are seeing those gusts up to 40 kilometers an hour at times into southeastern Saskatchewan, maybe a bit of a breezy Friday. But there is a pattern change coming in the weather. You see that chillier air mass as the jet stream kind of dives to the south a little bit. That moves on off to the east, and much warmer weather, a Pacific air mass begins to move in, and that really bumps our temperatures up. You see Regina, we hover around the freezing mark the next couple of days, and then well into the double digits by the time we get into early next week. You'll see there is a chance of some evening flurries I put for Thursday. For Saskatoon, maybe a slight chance of an afternoon flurry. We'll hover below freezing, I think, for these next couple of days. And then we get some of that warmth as well. Saskatoon, we might not quite crack the double digits there as we get into Tuesday and Wednesday with some breezy conditions, but at least those overnight lows, Dan, looking like we will maybe even jump above the freezing mark. So some nicer days definitely coming.
So you're saying real spring is on the way?
This might just be it. No more false springs from here on out.
Love it. Thanks, Ethan.
You're welcome.
The baseball world is going crazy over a new bat that is making all the difference on the diamond. As Jamie Strachan explains, the new Torpedo bat is a hit with Major League players and fans alike.
Toronto Blue Jay Davis Schneider has a new weapon.
Pitchers are throwing 98, so, I need as much help as I can get.
They call it the Torpedo bat.
It looks a little bit weird, just the way that it tapers off at the top, but other than that, it's, I feel like it's just a regular wood bat.
3-run home run for Jazz Chisholm.
The bats used by major leaguers haven't changed for years. But on this season's opening weekend, the New York Yankees clubbed a record number of home runs, many in the lineup using the Torpedo bat.
I started using it the last week and a half of spring, I think. I just never looked back after that.
Developed by an MIT physicist, the idea of the bat is that it brings more wood or mass to the part of the bat where contact most often happens.
Cruz drills it to center.
Major League Baseball says the bat is legal, and in a sport resistant to change, players are definitely intrigued.
It's just blown up. There's been nonstop emails, texts from tons of pros.
Ottawa area bat makers Sam Batts has a long list of major league clients and has quickly ramped up production.
Probably hundreds of players across the MLB are now ordering this within the last couple of days. So it's been a crazy day for the bat makers in the world.
Feels pretty good. This is the Torpedo bat that everybody's talking about. Davis Schneider is the only Blue Jay that uses it, and he says so far it has made a big difference.
At the same time, Schneider jokes, the Torpedo doesn't hit the ball for you. It's the carpenter, not the tools.
You still got to square up the ball, you still got to hit it hard, still be on time, so that aspect it doesn't really change.
But when it comes to hitting a baseball, often regarded as the hardest thing to do in sports, every little advantage helps. Jamie Strachan, CBC News, Toronto.
Congratulations on Top Gun.
Thank you.
Sorry to hear about Cougar. He and I were like brothers in flight school. He was a good man.
Still is a good man.
Yeah, that's what I meant.
Movie actor Val Kilmer has died of pneumonia. Kilmer starred in popular movies from the 1980s and 90s, including Top Gun. He also won critical acclaim playing musician Jim Morrison in the biopic The Doors, and made an impression as the Caped Crusader in Batman Forever. Kilmer battled throat cancer in 2014 and had surgery, which left him with a raspy voice. He was 65 years old. We'll be back after the break. A Saskatoon comedian is serving up some lunchtime entertainment. It's called Lunch Kit Comedy, and it takes place at the Art Bar in Riversdale. We caught up with Dakota Ray Hebert to hear more.
Guys ready for some Lunch Kit Comedy? Yay!
What are you expecting from this crowd?
We still had people buying beer, so like lunchtime doesn't necessarily mean I don't know what people do for a living, and I'm curious when I see you buy some beers.
And I hope to be, like, I'm working on.
It's loosely inspired by Calgary's Lunchbox Theatre. They do these 45-minute plays for everyone in the downtown area, and we are looking at our art bar schedules. And I'm not very pregnant. I'm halfway pregnant. I'm about 19 weeks pregnant, and I'm tired now, and I don't want to be out late at night doing comedy shows, and so I'm trying to think of selfish ways to do my work, but in the afternoon. So it's kind of inspirational, kind of selfish, and kind of just like offering a new, different way to take in comedy, and on people's lunch breaks. I just hope that we keep offering other ways to take in shows. They're able to support local acts at a time when their kids are in school or in daycare, and not have to feel guilty about or stressed about finding a babysitter or finding something to eat, or what are we going to do? Oh my gosh, it's just come in, sit down, laugh at some jokes, and head back to work.
Ethan Williams is back, and he's no joke. Ethan?
No joke about the weather. Maybe I'll have to check that out on my lunch break, though, up here in Saskatoon. Seems like a fun lunch hour for sure. And one thing I do know that is all serious about the weather here in Saskatoon is that we're going to be seeing some clear skies overnight. Let's take a look at what we're going to be seeing. And those clear skies, not only for Saskatoon, but for much of South and Central as that cold front continues to move through. It's going to be a chilly night under those clear skies, though, -10 to -15 for northern Saskatchewan. Those temperatures about seasonal for your overnight conditions for this time of year. A little bit more snow going to be moving through the far north. Again, a couple of centimeters for those locations closer to the northern border. Otherwise, you're expecting quite a bit of cloud in the north. For South and Central, we start the day Thursday with some sunny conditions, a little bit of cloud cover moving in, and again, the possibility of some flurries through southwestern and south central areas as we get into the afternoon hours. Those temperatures in the wake of that cold front, Dan, staying back around that freezing mark once again before we make a better breakthrough temperature-wise later in the week.
Still looks great. Thanks, Ethan.
You're welcome.
And that's it for us tonight. For more news anytime, head to cbc.ca/sask or subscribe to the YouTube channel. You can also download the CBC News app on your smartphone or tablet. Thanks for watching, everyone.